Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. This is the second video in bars and graph chart series. So please do watch first video to understand the basic concepts better. So in that video what I had covered is why is data visualization important, what is a bar graph, and in what instances do we use bar graphs. So if you are already aware of these concepts and all, you can directly start with this video as well. And in this video what we will be covering is we would be plotting some bar graphs with more data variables and also some use cases where bar graphs would be very apt, and also we would try to understand how do we plot a graph when say the variables that are there, they are very skewed. So let us begin the session. Open a Google Slides file as well as Google Sheets file. Moving to Google Sheets file, I have already populated some data here. For the ease of explaining, you can also create your own data points or say headers, etc. You can randomly fill the data as well. The final point is that you learn how to use bar graph properly. The data doesn't really matter. So in this case, what the data I have taken is that I have taken different cities which have highest population density, and I am plotting a graph here. So if I have to plot a graph here, all I have to do in this Google Sheet is I have to select the data. I click on the insert option and I select chart. Once I do that, the graph has been plotted. As per the things we learned in our previous videos, we would be removing these grid lines initially. Then this header doesn't make sense, so we are removing this as well. Then we try to basically adjust the font size of the data that is already filled. Okay. Once this is done, we are now moving to the x-axis header as well as y-axis header. These also will try to adjust basically. Once this is done, we would probably need to also add data pointers on these bar graphs as well. So, or the data labels. I just click on the data labels option here in the chart editor and I get the data here. I think it wouldn't be properly visible, so I'll just bold the data labels that are there. This is how the graph looks like. Say I want to highlight certain things in this graph. So what I would be doing is, say for example, you can see cities across the world here, but I want to say highlight those cities which are part of India. So what I do for that is I basically change the color of this graph. I click on one of the graphs and I would go to, in the chart editor, I would go to fill color option. Here you can see the auto option has been given. What I do is I change it to say this particular color, so the whole thing looks a little darker, and I want to highlight those cities which are part of India, and I want to highlight the population density of those cities. So I would be individually selecting those cities by double clicking on the bar that represent these cities. For instance, for this Mumbai, I double click on this bar, and here I have an option to fill color for this individual bar as well. So I would select this. Same way for Kolkata, same way for Chennai. So I have highlighted these things, and these data labels that are there, they aren't very much evident for those graphs which are say not in the violet color. I just change the data label color here, in the chart editor section again. I'd change it to say this color. Once this is done, I'd probably want to edit out the header for the y-axis as well. Make it like this. So now we have the graph that is required. Let me just copy this graph from here by applying Ctrl C and go to the Google Slides document that we have opened. Let me just paste it here. So you get the option to link to spreadsheet. Keep it linked. So if you make any changes in the Google Sheets, that automatically gets reflected in the Google Slides as well. I press on the paste option here and the graph is populated. Now imagine you are giving this particular presentation to someone in government or say in some forum in India. So in that case you would be able to easily highlight and tell ki Mumbai's population density is this much, etc. Although we have plotted this graph, we have made one minor mistake. Take your time and tell me what that mistake is. I'll pause for 5 seconds. So the mistake was we haven't mentioned in what unit is population density mentioned in this graph. That is always important because a graph should always be a medium where a person looks at it at one glance and gets the entire information. So we'll have to add that. Let me just select a text here for this instance and let me just write population density is in per square mile. Let me just reduce the font size here and make it italic and probably move it somewhere here and give it a highlight if required. Let us put a header to this graph as well, so it is clear to someone. Even if someone is reading this, then also it is very clear to them. Let's say in top 10 cities of the world which have highest population density, India bags first, second and eighth top cities. If I may reduce this font size a little bit here and probably highlight it a bit and change the color. So this graph looks okay now. We have understood how to plot a graph with two variables and lot of data points. Let us complicate this a bit and move to say 3 variables and lot of data points. So let me go back to the Google Sheet back. Let me go to this particular tab here. Here what I have done is I have named the cities. I have kept the population density as it is, but I have added one more column called average transit speed in city. So through this data what we will try to identify is population density directly proportional or say related to the average transit speed in a city. So to understand that, let us actually plot a graph. So we already have a data. All we have to do is select the data, click on the insert and plot a chart. Now if you see this graph, you can clearly see that population density is mentioned while the average transit speed is not at all visible on this graph. This is happening because we have population density in the order of thousands, even about 10,000, while the speed is in kilometers and it is just two digits. So how do we make sure that both the parameters are plotted on the graph? At the same time, we can infer something out of that as well. I'll give you 5 seconds to solve this. If you require a longer duration to solve this, please pause the video for that much time and solve this. Okay. So what we can do is, since the population density is in square miles and it is in the order of say about 10,000 or 76,790, etc., we can probably denote this data in thousands, or we can write it somewhere in the graph or below the graph as in thousands, and probably divide the whole data by 1000. So to do that, what I would require is I'd basically put a equal to sign here and divide this by 1000. I'll just drag the same formula down, so all the squared per square mile data that was there, it has been divided by 1000. Now you can see that 76 and 10 both have two digits and both are below 100 and can be represented on the same graph, and we wouldn't have the problem that we faced in this particular graph. So what I'd first do is I'd basically copy this data and I would just paste it here as values only. So this comes out in this order. Again, this can be in decimal order. Since I have set the format to be approximate and full numbers, it is coming in full numbers. You have the option to basically add a decimal or remove a decimal option here. So if I do this and this, the decimal gets added, and if I do this, the decimal gets removed and the whole value gets approximated. Now again we can rationalize this graph or make this graph more detailed. Let us first of all remove the header. It isn't looking good. Then let us add a horizontal axis title, naming cities. Let me just adjust this as well. And a vertical axis title, naming population density in thousands per square mile and actually this 1000 is not properly visible here, so let us remove the whole thing and add it in the slides that we have created rather than inserting it in the graph itself. Once this is done, we'll remove the grid lines that are there. Come on, you know the drill now. You just make sure that the different headers that are there, they are clearly visible. In this case, I'm not considering that the countries also be visible here, because we essentially need the city data only. If it is countries that are also required, then we can do one thing, that is we go to setup and change the chart type itself. For now it is a vertical or the column bar chart that we have. We can also change it to say horizontal bar chart, so it looks something like this and we get a little bit more space here. And if we adjust the font size as well a little bit, then except for this Seoul, we can see the country name for all the countries. And in this case we can add the data labels as well here by clicking on the things. Again, same drill goes for the speed as well. So once this is done, now you have the data visualization of the data that you required. So now we know the average speed in these cities by different vehicles, as well as the population density of these cities. Let us just plot it here. Once we get it here, let me just enlarge it a bit, and we had to write in thousands per square mile, right? This was for the population density. So let us just add it. Density is in, let me correct my spelling and reduce the font size. Let me probably highlight it a little bit. Once this is done, keep it here. Bring it down a little bit so that there is space for something to write at the top. If we observe this graph also now, we can see that there isn't any kind of relation between the population density as well as the average transit speed in these particular cities. So let us write our observation here. Population density and average transit speed aren't directly proportional. Once we write it here, we can highlight it, change the color, bring it to the center. Yeah, that is it for this week. Thank you for going through the video till the end, and also I would be very happy if you are practicing this with a slide and a Google Sheet on your own as well. And do let me know if you have any feedback. And we will be continuing on the bar graphs itself. There are a few more kind of bar graphs that we have to cover, which we will be covering in the next video. See you in the next video.